Tonight on First Tuesday.
It's an accident that should never have happened. If the machinery had been guarded as it should have been, there's no one can dispute Timothy would still have two legs today.
Are these the killing fields of Britain? We investigate the safety record down on the farm. And we go north to Scotland, to a community fighting to save their one-room school and their village.
People with young families certainly won't come and stay here if there's no school.
And they can't afford $20,000 a year for our school. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Good evening and welcome to First Tuesday. Tonight we're looking at two different aspects of rural life. We travel north to meet a small community fighting to keep open their village school. But first we go down on the farm, where life can be freer and fuller and very dangerous. 82 people died and over 300 were injured in farming accidents in 1985, the last year for which there are full statistics. That showed a dramatic increase on previous years, and it pointed up again how the very nature of farm life makes accidents possible. Children live and work on farms, and they account for 130 of the 800 deaths in farm accidents over the last 10 years. Some of the cases in tonight's film, two of them involving young teenagers, show that an accident can mean prosecution and a fine for the farmer, but permanent injury or even death for the farm worker. The film raises fundamental questions as to why farming's safety record is so poor. Bitter Harvest begins with the reconstruction of a 1979 farm accident with tragic consequences for the victim and for his family.
A towing chain breaks loose and whiplashes through a tractor cab. 8 years on, farm worker David Foster revisits the scene of a near-fatal accident, which left him brain damaged and shattered the lives of his family.
I woke up there and 2 months. I don't know how to tell, you know. Pens told me, chain and all that snapped, and policeman photoed it, all, my brains and all. And, well, look at me now.
The doctor told me if David did live, he'd be a cabbage, and that would be all. He wouldn't be able to do anything, talk or nothing. He'd just be sat in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. So he asked me if I could cope with that, and I said, yeah. I said I didn't want no machine switching off or anything. While I was breathing, I wanted him alive.
In the year of his accident, there were 94 deaths in agriculture. David survived, but as a cripple.
He's suffering from epileptic fits. He's paralysed down one side. A lot of pain in his head. He's partly deaf in one ear, which I have to do everything for him. He hasn't got much enjoyment at all. I mean, he used to like his farming. He used to like his woodwork. He used to do that, you know, make furniture, things like that, which now he can't do any of that.
David was a conscientious farm worker for 17 years. He's now forced to watch his son dig the family allotment.
He just sits while we do all the digging and rotavating and planting and everything.
You want them sprouts moving first. You had to move that in first place.
But that makes him madder, me and Philip doing it. And then David gets right depressed and starts crying. He said he's useless. All he says he wants to end his life. There's no to live for. David couldn't accept that he'd never work again until this last 3 years. He's finally accepted it, that he'll never work again.
Agriculture in this day and age regularly kills and injures men, women and children. It clearly has to be seen not as, if you like, the rustic bliss which it is often presented as, but rather as we say, the second most dangerous industry in this country.
Farming is a dangerous occupation with an appalling accident record. In the last 10 years, more than 800 deaths in British agriculture. More people die each year in farming than in mining. Many deaths and injuries involve machinery. The results are often horrific. In the last 6 months, 5 victims have suffocated in Tower grain silos. Slurry tanks and pits claimed 3 lives last year. Sometimes children are victims, as in this reconstruction by the Health and Safety Executive. Farming's poor safety record is partly due to isolated work conditions and to individual carelessness. But farmers' attitudes are also a factor. Most employers and farm managers take seriously the safety of employees. But some disregard the laws which protect farm workers. In a recent 12-month period, over 100 employers were prosecuted for breaking health and safety laws. A recent study of accidents by the industry watchdog, the Health and Safety Executive, was an indictment of farm management, including the self-employed. Over 60% of fatal accidents were caused by management failure.
We would think that 61% may be a low estimate. The simple facts are that our members know what the dangers are in the field. Very often the management know what the dangers are. But unfortunately, the attitude is, can we afford to do anything about it? And the almost inevitable answer to that question from most employers is, well, it must take second priority to our profits.
In general, I think that farming aims to use safe equipment to prevent accidents to men, to prevent accidents to children, and I think that we are doing our best to possibly keep down the number of accidents on farms.
The consequences of farm accidents are most tragic in young workers. When Timothy Pallister was a 14-year-old schoolboy, he worked casually for a North Yorkshire farmer. His employer broke the law by letting him operate an unguarded machine. Timothy can only guess at what happened because of the effects of shock. The machinery tore off his leg above the knee.
The morning of the accident, I was sent to dig potatoes on a machine similar to this one, but a much older model. The machine I was working on didn't have these guards on, or any of this, and there wasn't one on the tractor either. And there was a jagged piece of metal, because of early damage, sticking out. I must have slipped or stumbled or something. I fell onto that, presumably, and that just dragged me in. And when I was found, my leg had actually been twisted off on the PTO shaft. It'd been a twisting round action. And this shaft, when it's working, is running about 540 breaths per minute.
Matt freed him, carried him into a Land Rover, went back and carried his leg, put that in the Land Rover, and then I believe the farmer's wife took them back up to the farm. By the time I was alerted, because I was working in storing the potatoes in the farm buildings, Timothy was lying on a mattress in the farm kitchen, covered up by a blanket, still conscious, screaming but not hysterical, not aware that he'd lost his leg in any way whatsoever. He kept saying, "My foot hurts." The friction burns from the PTO shaft and his clothes taut across his face had taken all the skin from just below his eye right down. He had a deep laceration which needed stitches on his lip. All his shoulder had gone through a coat, overalls, a sweater, a shirt, a T-shirt. They'd all been eaten in and the flesh had been eaten off by the PTO shaft. So what I could see was hard enough to accept without my brain trying to accept that he'd lost his leg.
You're at rock bottom and you can't work out how you're going to get back up again and carry on with the rest of your life. It was just the depression and the pain, and you just couldn't think how it was going to get better. You know, you thought it was just going to stay like that, or you were just going to be stuck in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, sort of thing.
He'd just been picked to play football for the school team. His life was outdoors, an active life. Suddenly, he was a cripple on crutches. He used to lie in the bed and say, "Mum, why did you let me live? I don't want to live like this."
What I miss most about losing my leg is you can't blend in with everybody. Say you're taking a young lady out or something, you can't take her for a walk because you can't walk. You go to a dance, it's like sitting in a big dance hall, everyone's dancing, you're sat there in the corner.
The farmer who employed Timothy was prosecuted and fined.
It's an accident that should never have happened. If the machinery had been guarded as it should have been, there's no one can dispute Timothy would still have 2 legs today.
Of 164 children killed in agriculture since 1975, about 1/5 were killed doing work on family farms or for employers.
One of the problems we face with young people in the industry is that it's the only industry where workers, young workers, children, are regularly employed. We have the Factories Act, we have the Mines and Quarries Act, we have a whole range of acts which specifically forbid the employment of children, and yet agriculture remains one of those exceptions.
Agriculture is an industry where young people from the age of 13 can operate heavy machinery. A 13-year-old child can legally drive or ride on powerful tractors. It's been estimated that thousands of children drive tractors for 1 week a year, mainly at harvest time. A proposed voluntary code for farmers may do little to change this practice. The results of inexperience can be lethal.
Our argument is that the most dangerous place to be driving a tractor is very often in the field, which may be sloping, slippy, and all sorts of rough terrain. This is, if you like, one of the fundamental arguments that the union has with the National Farmers Union. We believe that the age of 13 for driving tractors is far too low. That age, we believe, should be, without doubt, no lower than 16 years. Because machines are more sophisticated, certainly considerably more powerful than they ever have been before, and obviously the 13-year-old child is not in a position to fulfill those requirements.
They may be well helping out on a family farm, and it may be fairly essential at busy times that these children may be able to help perhaps at the hay time or possibly in the potato harvest, when simple movements of tractors are a great help to the successful completion of the harvest. The record speaks for itself that the number of accidents for farm children driving tractors between 13 and 16, I think, certainly bears examination, and we are quite proud of it.
You're proud of it?
Yes, indeed.
The record, though improving, is that 9 children between the ages of 13 and 15 have been killed driving tractors since 1975. It remains the policy of the National Farmers Union to defend the regulations which allow children to drive tractors.
We are a democratic organisation, and I'm an elected officer of this organisation. It is a considered opinion of the union that at the age of 13-year-old, that either a boy or a girl should be able safely to drive a farm tractor.
Despite the record?
Despite the record, yes.
Responsibility for farm safety doesn't rest with farmers alone. Last year, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents declined to offer a safety award to manufacturers and suppliers of equipment on the grounds that none of them was adequately selling safety to farmers. The tranquil countryside of East Sussex, where a schoolboy and casual worker, Stephen Croucher, was killed in 1983 on a poultry farm.
He was a happy-go-lucky kid. Used to give me a bit of cheek now and then, you know, but he was just, I don't know, he was just a boy.
The death of their 14-year-old son has shattered the lives of parents Roy and Susan Croucher.
He was just beginning to sort of, you know, really grow up and become a young man and getting into the girlfriends, and he was a handsome boy. He lived for, you know, he loved his football, and he was actually just getting to the stage where these scouts come and have a look at him because he used to play so well. When Steve came along, we just felt that we'd got the perfect family, but it wasn't meant to be. I had him taken away from me.
He actually started work at the farmer's house doing the gardening. He then went on to packing eggs at the farm. I think he was mainly involved with making sure that the machines were started up in correct rotation and that the various belts that were carrying the eggs were running correctly. I didn't realise that there was any danger involved in it. In fact, being a child working up there, I would have thought the complete opposite, but it appears that there was quite a substantial danger.
We had a phone call, and Roy answered the phone, and he said to me, Steve's had an accident, he's unconscious. And with that, we got in the car and went chasing up the farm. And when we got there, I can remember this young girl, I think it was, standing at the gateway. And it really didn't register at the time, but she was crying. And I said to her, "Where's Steve?" And she just said to us, "You better go up there." And we drove a bit further up the yard. And there was all these people standing round. And I got out the car and I started to panic. And I kept shouting, "Where was Steve?" And nobody would answer me. And then somebody said, "He's down there," and they pointed to this great big shed. And I went to run down there, and this ambulance man came out and they just took me off to the house, and somebody said that it was too late. And then a policeman came in, and we knew him. He knew Steve, and he knew me from Steve's school days. And I said, "Please tell me it's not true." And he said, "I can't." He said, "I'm sorry." He said, "But it is." And I didn't have Steve anymore.
Stephen Croucher was killed by machinery which the farmer had failed to guard. This is a similar machine, but properly guarded according to the law. On the machine in which Stephen died, these cross shafts were totally exposed. Stephen's clothes entangled in a shaft. He was strangled.
Stephen was basically strangled by his jumper, was caught on the bolt on this bar.
The jumper was caught in the machinery and just tightened around his neck. And when the accident actually happened, there was nobody. He was completely on his own. And it wasn't until, in another part, they realised that the eggs weren't coming through on this conveyor belt that they went to see what had happened. And somebody, I can't remember, I think it was a young girl, saw him in this machine, caught by his jumper. I think the farmer himself has got to take the biggest majority of the blame, as far as I'm concerned.
The farm owner was prosecuted and fined £500. He said in his defence that the machine was supplied to him without safety guards. The suppliers of the machinery were prosecuted and fined a larger sum. Stephen's parents condemned both defendants, but also the Health and Safety Inspectorate. An inspector visited the farm prior to Stephen's death and advised the farmer to fit guards to his machines. He failed to do so. In court, it was said he was misled by the suppliers, but the inspector did not return to check.
There was a warning quite a long time before Stephen had his accident, and it was never followed through. The health and safety people never went back and checked. If they go and warn these people, if they go and look at this machinery and say they should give them a certain time, a few weeks or something, and then go back and make sure, not leave it until somebody's life is lost.
I can only imagine, and I wasn't there, that the circumstances in which the inspector saw an event were such that he felt he could rely on the occupier to put things right without going back.
And he got it wrong.
Well, he may have got it wrong, yes, but the inspector did what I would have expected him to do, which was to advise the occupier of the problem. And it was then for the occupier to have got it right, not the inspector.
Well, what about the employee in a situation like that?
Well, as we all know, in these cases, tragic cases, the employee has suffered, but he's suffered because somebody has committed a criminal act.
They all seem to be passing the buck from one to the other, and somewhere along the line, to save other people, somebody's got to take a responsibility.
Well, obviously, this is an area where you've lost a guard off here.
It's the inspector's job to make employers comply with the law and run safe farms. But 160 inspectors must cover 250,000 farms. Civil service cutbacks have led to a sharp fall in their numbers since 1979.
Is missing off that, needs replacing. And
It's been estimated that an average farm will be visited by an inspector once every 8 to 12 years. This presents little deterrent to farmers.
I will have a look around the other side of it.
The best regulation or legislation in the world is completely useless if it's incapable of enforcement. And I think that's the situation we face with the Health and Safety Executive. With the best will in the world, the numbers of inspectors in the field and the resources available to them are wholly insufficient to the task which they are expected to perform.
This farm, near Rochdale, Lancashire, received 3 visits from inspectors over 10 years. The farmer was advised on at least 2 occasions to have his electrical installation checked by a qualified electrician. He failed to do so. In July 1985, 16-year-old Stuart Platt was on a youth training scheme at the farm. He was told to steam clean the calf sheds. It had been raining, and the power cable was stretched across the wet farmyard into the shed. 2 extension cables, later described as in poor condition, were coupled together. Stuart Platt was electrocuted.
Nobody knew exactly what time he died. They can only put it within a quarter of an hour or so. But they knew the steam cleaner was stopped and went to investigate and found Stuart lying by the steam cleaner. And he had burns on his hands and all up his arm from the hose. The steam cleaner has a hose, and apparently was burnt from that hose. And well, nobody knows exactly what part of the equipment was to blame because there was that much wrong with it.
At the inquest, it emerged that an installation was faulty, but it was a variety of other faults which had led to the boy's death. A loose switch on the steam cleaner had caused splash marks inside the switch box. An earth wire in a plug was disconnected from its terminal. Live copper wires were covered only by tape. The coroner said amateur workmanship and lack of maintenance had contributed to Stuart Platt's death. It almost constituted a lottery, he said, as to who might have been a victim. The farmer, Peter Naylor, was prosecuted under health and safety legislation and fined. He declined to be interviewed for this programme.
The farmer got fined £1,250 by the court. But in my opinion, he should be in jail. Even in court, the farmer was pleading for leniency because he'd spent £3,000 updating the electrical equipment. If he'd have spent £3,000 before, Stuart might be here today.
No employer has ever been jailed for breaking health and safety laws. Only rarely are farmers fined more than a few £100s, up to a maximum of £2,000 in a magistrate's court.
The only way I feel that if they're fined money is going to be any sort of deterrent, it's got to be a lot more than what it is. They're dicing with people's lives. It's not like one of their family. And perhaps if it was, perhaps then these people, anybody that's got different bits of machinery, would perhaps sit up and think, well, we'll make our machinery safe.
Well, there's no deterrent to stop them from just carrying on, because they get fined £2,000. It cost that farmer £3,000 to have his electrical equipment uprated. So they might as well just ride the luck until something happens at the expense of somebody else.
The judiciary has also spoken out. While sentencing a farmer for an offence in Crown Court, Judge Lewis Bowen expressed surprise that he could only impose a fine. He said, "It may be necessary to force irresponsible farmers to comply with their duties by threat of imprisonment."
We need to have some kind of central governmental guidance on levels of fines, which in addition must be much higher than the £2,000 maximum at the moment. We need to see custodial sentences where these are clearly merited. And as an example, I might cite and this is not particularly uncommon, the occasion where an employer is warned once, twice, even 3 times by the Health and Safety Executive, only to carry on with the offence, which subsequently results in the death or injury of a worker. Now, where death results from that kind of circumstance, I would suggest that there is little or no difference between that and manslaughter.
In agriculture, deaths and injuries to young people occur regularly, whether at play, at work, or simply as bystanders. For all those categories, 164 children have died since 1975. In most cases, culpability cannot be established. The industry has responded with a draft voluntary code of practice, but for some families, it's already too late.
Nobody has taken the responsibility, really and truthfully, for me losing Steve. Somebody's got to be able to say that you've got to, you do these things or else, because it'll just go on and on.
I suppose if you asked any farmer about safety, he would say he was safety conscious, but when you're under pressure, and after all, they're in it to make money. That's the end result, is to make money. That's why they're farming. If they cut corners, at the end of the day, it's the workers who are going to suffer.
You never get over that. I don't think I'll ever get over Stuart's death. It's always there, and there's always constant reminders. Stuart died at the hands of a farmer. You can't condemn all farmers like that. But farms are very, very dangerous places, and I didn't realise how dangerous.
This year, Steve would have been 18. There's not a day goes past without Steve is in our thoughts. It is a life sentence. It's like a part of you dying inside.
The Health and Safety Executive 2 weeks ago launched a campaign to stem the casualty rate. Aimed at farmers whom they feel are too complacent, it carries the chilling slogan, "The Killing Fields." It claims that agriculture kills or seriously injures at least 6 people each week. In a moment, the fight to save a village school with a remarkable schoolteacher. That's after the break. Welcome back. One might be forgiven for believing that there's an election on the way. I think it's got something to do with a new elasticity in government policies. Take small village primary schools. Only last year, Education Minister Kenneth Baker said that many would have to go in order to save money. But today, the Department of Education relented, announcing that arguments other than cost effectiveness would be now taken into account. Good news, maybe, for England and Wales, but it doesn't affect Scotland and villages like Ardentinny in Argyllshire, where the 23-pupil primary school is threatened with closure. Typically, the people of Ardentinny aren't taking this lying down. They've brought to the administrative heart of Glasgow itself their battle cry, "Save our school." In tonight's film, we look at what it is they want to save.
Was very fine indeed, and he was made of chocolate from his tail right up to his long ears. And suddenly, splash, he fell into the pond. He struggled out, and he landed right on top of Mrs. Pooh. And all there was left was a little pool of brown chocolate in the ground, along with a little black cat called Mrs. Pooh.
Okay, it's too much, I give you a knife.
And I want them to be able to go out from here knowing right from wrong.
He's a great big hugger, this boy is.
And if they don't learn that here in this small setup, they'll never learn it anywhere.
And Matthew.
I want them to be able to cope to the best of their abilities with all the problems that will beset them, even in their early years.
How do we know the red arrow is pointing?
I want them to be able to overcome their problems and to be able to use their initiative.
Show me a two. Good.
At Ardentinny, we have a school which we consider is second to none. The school teacher is but the best. My daughter, who's now aged 8, has, to my view, a reading capacity that I only achieved at a larger state school when I was 11.
It's just like a big family. The children learn to look after each other. Their social values are just great. I mean, the big ones look after the little ones. They're socially, they learn to tolerate each other because they're in a small classroom, which we all appreciate, but they tolerate each other in it and they help each other in it.
Wait a minute.
The children love being at this school. My two children don't like holidays, and even Saturdays is a drag when they suddenly discover there's no school.
On the shore of a Scottish loch, Ardentinny village in Argyllshire has its pride and joy, a one-room, one-teacher school. For 100 years, the village children have been coming here. From 4-year-olds to 11-year-olds, they're taught in the same room by the same teacher. In September last year, the local education authority for Strathclyde decided it was going to close down Ardentinny School and bus the 20 or so children over 5 miles away to a bigger school in the neighbouring village of Strone. The first to hear the news was Ardentinny's teacher for the last 17 years, Kathleen Robertson.
So I just said, oh gosh, you're closing me in June. I thought you only did that with schools of small numbers. No, he said, it's policy, you know. He said, we've got a big modern school, he said, down the road there with an empty classroom. And I think the children will be better suited there. Do you think there'll be trouble? I said, I think there might be.
It's very, very important that we make a good show on the sets and show them that we really mean business. Where are we going? And what are we going to tell them when we get there? Save Ardentinny School, hands off our school and hands off our village. What are you going to tell them? Save our school! Save our school! Save our school! Save our school! Save our school!
When I heard that this school was to be considered for closure, I was absolutely horrified. I cannot put that too much. The village is absolutely unanimous. Everyone is so hopping mad that unity within the village has never been like it before.
It's really annoying when somebody up in Glasgow can turn round and say, want to close down Ardentinny School, and I've never ever been down here or seen it or seen how happy the kids are, and we're not prepared to let it go at that.
You feel as if you're bashing your head against a brick wall because there's people a long way away from the village that aren't looking at it from our point of view, that are just looking at it from the distance of Glasgow and are not looking at the real problems in a village.
Very annoyed to think that they can just take a pencil and sort of score through the name Ardentinny School and that's the end of it.
Going to affect the parents of future children. I wouldn't have come here if there hadn't been a school to send my children to. Without the school, we won't get young families, and if we don't get young families, the whole village is going to die.
The decision to make this proposal was occasioned by the fact that there is enough room in the school which we propose should be the receiving school for both the previous catchment areas. There was enough room and a general belief that provided the travelling distances are not so great as to cause serious inconvenience, it is better for pupils to be educated in the larger environment than in a very small environment.
I mean, small is good, and that is being found out in lots of countries. And some countries are actually building small schools now on purpose because they've realised that small is good. And I think the only reason can be money. The reason it all comes down to, I think, is that they're wanting to save a few £1,000s.
Of course, there is a financial aspect to it too, in that if you save money on buildings, then that money is available for spending elsewhere in the education budget.
If they put a lot of little schools together, they think they're going to save some money. But it makes me very angry because we're talking here about a school that costs about £20,000 a year to run. Now, over there is the Coalport base. It's going to be the new Trident base. It now has Polaris missiles for the defence of our country, the deterrent. They're spending about 20 billion pounds on it, and they can't afford £20,000 a year for our school. It's absolutely ludicrous.
whole life, really, has been this school and making it what it is. I've put every talent that I've got, just everything about the place has suited my character, just put it like that, suited my personality. Everything is special about it to me because it's been my school. It's been a very funny life, really. I knew from the age of 11 that I wanted to be a teacher. And it was a very strong conviction in my mind. One grows up, goes to university, college, the lot, and enjoys the life of it. Super. And I did meet a very nice person, a musician. I shouldn't really be giving you my love story here, my life story. And anyway, I was going to marry this chap, but he took lung cancer and died. And we were engaged to be married. And I never really found anybody that I liked as much later on. And I never had children, obviously, of my own. But I think you're always recompensed because I've had such fun with these ones, you know. And obviously, it's been a much closer relationship than it would have been in the bigger school situation. There's no doubt about it.
A better place than that. Oh, Fiona, we can't keep shaking in the fire.
Well, that's good. I would think possibly in the light of all that I know now that this has been the right step for me. I've just enjoyed every minute of it.
Right, put some more of your sticks on, that'll do, that's fine. That's it. Look, these are...
I'm very fond of children, you see.
I was saying go down there, go down there. The boy said no, the fire's already
right, you come up out of there then, right? No point getting your eyes all steamed up.
Okay, Daddy. Oh, you can't expect him to stay clean like you do in your mum's cooker.
Okay, take a sausage and put it in. They're good.
Yeah. Hope yours goes off.
Is it really good? I must have.
Better than the underwood.
Better than the ones at home? I should think so. How are they? Hold on, I'll take this. Good job.
Sarah's bringing wood.
I have children here who really need specialised kind of teaching that I've been able to offer. And the mind boggles a bit. I shudder when I think of the situation of these little children going into a larger unit. Even the thought of it closing has caused a tremendous amount of distress and upset and ill feeling. I don't really know. I don't really know. I think in many cases it'll cause despair.
The villagers were given their say by the Education Authority. There was one evening meeting to discuss a consultation document that listed the council's reasons for shutting down the school.
It was anything but a consultation document. It had so many inaccuracies in it, which would have been quite clear to anyone who had bothered to visit the school in the first place, that one cannot understand how they occurred. The school premises were misdescribed as being poorer than they actually are. The school roll projection figures given were wholly inaccurate, and the report contained so many biased statements of personal opinion that it was not a fair consultative document. It is my own personal belief that whatever reason they may put forward for closing the school, the real incentive for closure is administrative convenience.
I feel that they were giving us great blanket statements about reasons, just taking them out of the air without any evidence at all. They said the children were educationally disadvantaged at Ardentinny School, but they've presented no evidence at all, no inspectors' reports or attainment tests or anything of that kind.
Ardentinny is very cramped. There's no question about that. It's very cramped, and of course, since the roll has been swollen by, I think it's 5 pupils exceptionally admitted from out with the catchment area, it's getting towards its capacity, which is only about 26, and they're having to use the lobby entrance to the school for music practice and so on, in a way that is as a long-term feature anyway, undesirable if you can do it better. There's a lack of specialist provision, of course. If you've got to use all your space for teaching, you haven't got anywhere else internally that you can go to for PE, for example.
I don't think facilities ever make a school. I think it's, first of all, the staff who are running the school who make the school, because they give the lead and the children pick up from there. No, I don't think facilities at all make a school. It's the quality of teaching that's in it that makes it. All right, Mary, have we got there?
1, 2.
So I think it's just the very atmosphere of the place that one would hope that they'll be able to go out into the world and cope with everything and be the kind of people that I would hope that they will be.
See, you're not really all that tired, are you? Come on,
Just the 2 wheels. That would be lovely.
Now, Jonathan.
And what do the children think of you?
I'm the ogre of their lives. I'm the ogre, the very ogre of their being. They've to come in here, they're to be faced with me every day of, say, 5, 7 years of their lives, an awfully long time. So we have to have a happy sort of relationship. Otherwise it could be sheer hell, couldn't it, for both of us? Why are you going at that time of the year?
I can get us from the hot places in the...
You think it'll be warmer there at that time?
Yeah, she's stricter than the other ones because they were all soft, and when you got something wrong, they just left it wrong on the shots and explains it to you and helps you on.
I like her as well. She is stricter than the other teachers, but
mountaineering
I think she explains the things to you if you get stuck.
So you'd have breakfast and an evening meal, right?
I don't really like bigger schools because the teacher doesn't really get a chance to come round to you that many times.
I like the music very much. Before I came here, I couldn't play a note of music and I couldn't read music, and now I play the flute.
As the villagers see it, is that their school is performing a perfectly good job. Why close it?
Well, have you ever come across a community in which the parents, when faced with the possibility of their school closing, have said, we agree that the school is doing a poor job in the community and we want to see it closed? I've never come across a situation like that. I don't think there's any way in which we could be criticized credibly for not having listened to any point of view that was relevant, that came from the local community or any of those affected.
I'm sure they've done all the correct things, but I just don't think they've listened to us at all. I mean, they're supposed to be there to sort of, for our wishes to do what we want, but they're doing the absolute opposite if they go ahead with this. It's a very, very different way of life. The children have very different interests. For instance, my children are interested in their animals, ponies, etc. They wouldn't have time to do that in the evenings had they to travel from Strone. I mean, their whole education is built up of school education and education out with the school. They're just totally unaware of what it's like to live in a community like this and what the school does for the community. It'll just become a geriatric population eventually, because people with young families certainly won't come and stay here if there's no school.
I've loved it, every minute of it. It's been the most exciting experiment of my life. I've loved the place, I've loved the children, and the people have been terrific.
We are going to fight to the bitter end because we're so determined to save the school and in so doing saving the village.
It's the heart of the village, your school, and when that goes, everything else that goes with it.
Since that film was made, some good news. Strathclyde Education Authority has announced that Ardentinny School will be allowed to stay open for another year while a new consultation procedure is worked out. We'll be back on the first Tuesday in June. Until then, good night.